Today I made this example. Okay, so I ran into this plugin because of a friend's video on the lie, or however you might pronounce that in English. I have to ask him. I know in this channel I usually present in Reaper, but since I made this video for my English and my Spanish channel, something that doesn't happen very often, I will stick with my Ableton Live example. The main objective is to show you the plugin, so the DAW doesn't matter at all. This is a crazy sound designed drum machine. Okay, so we have 8 lanes or 8 tracks, 8 channels available within this drum machine. And you have a sequencer built in, you have a lot of modulation, 8 ways of modulating stuff, and a whole mixer section. And I love that we have actually a way to record out of the plugin without having to make strange bounces or workarounds. That's why I have these extra channels up here. And this is where I'm recording the audio coming from this plugin. I'm using this as a free trial, a demo that you can download on their website, and they are not paying me anything to do this. I just really like the idea of doing some fun sound design with it. But the whole idea is that whenever you start it, remember to lock it so it runs according to the tempo of your host session. And you have a bunch of sequencers already built in with a couple of sounds selected. One of the most interesting things about this is that you can morph between samples. So for example, here I have a wood drum with some reverb that's being sent in the mix section, or a clap, but you can morph between these two. Not only that, you can manipulate this blob using the tools right here. On the x-axis, you're looking at frequency. On the y-axis, you're looking at time. So if I flip it upside down, but if I flip it horizontally, I'm changing the frequency content. So that's a way of handling the samples in a really interesting way. I don't recall knowing anyone that does this frequency inversion thing. I don't remember. You can use the hand to manipulate the blob. And you can change the amplitude that's on the Z axis, and you can morph it so you can get more high end, a little bit wider into the low end. Or you have a lot of high end, you might want to cut it using the eraser right here and push it away. Just click and hold and it shoves it away. That sound is interesting. And that also works, right? All of these modifiers are applied per track. So you can modify the time scale, and that means like how is it being played? Is it playing slowly once you triggered it? Or really fast? And that goes hand in hand with this release fader right here that handles how long is a sample. So I can have a really long version of it playing, but make it really short and it turns into a percussion. Or I can make it really long, or with a short starting point, it's already kind of a percussion, and make it really, really tight. And I can add some dampening for that high end that's fuzzing around. And I'll take off the effect. The polyphony means that you can have several MIDI triggers or MIDI inputs, MIDI notes, MIDI events that trigger that sample. And I'm going to send like 32 notes really fast. And you will see that they get on top of each other. But if this is on a mono way of thinking, it's not really releasing it's not overlapping the sample with itself, so that's another way to do fun things. The frequency helps a lot with the tuning, and I'm so happy that they are using the mel scale because that's really musical. The contrast takes advantage of the most prominent information of the sample. This usually, I found out, that helps a lot with making tonal things, because if you take it out, it's pretty much noise, and the density works the other way around. If you increase it, you increase the noise part of it, of the sound, and if you cut it, you might get that grainy sound, and you can get a really tonal sound. If you take out both, that's synthesis again. That's real-time synthesis. You have this variation, so whenever you hit that sample, it's not exactly the same. I'm going to push quarter notes, and you will listen to the differences. So sometimes the release is higher, sometimes the release is lower, the amounts of noise, etc., etc. And the velocity, remember that whenever you see this kind of charts, you are looking at input versus output. In this case, it's the lower velocity allowed and the highest velocity allowed, starting from 0 to 127. And I can make it from really, really quiet. That's the quietest I can go on my push, or the highest. Or I can compress it from the MIDI input in the velocity. And that's the lowest I can go. From there, you have some global controls to manipulate all of the tracks at the same time. Transform is going to modify how much you're picking from the left or the right side of the samples that you selected. Timescale is going to change the duration. Frequency is going to tune them all. Contrast is going to do the tonal thing, and density is going to do the noise thing. So let me move it around really fast so you can more or less get a hang of what I'm talking about. One thing that you really shouldn't forget is that in every DAW we have access to so many things. I was looking for some sort of MIDI input so I could manipulate these kind of things. But as usual, I'm going to just left click and resize this. As usual, you can just go into the envelopes in Reprise built-in, really down. Once you open the piano roll editor, and you can go into the lanes and manipulate the plugins from there. But on Ableton Live, we have this clip information on the envelopes where I can go into VISCO and change not the global frequency, but this is going to show me always the last selected parameter. So I can change transform, for example, and add whatever modulation I want right here. I'm going to use the pencil tool so it's faster. I'm going to change the timescale, something like that. The frequency, something like that. The contrast, let's build something like some sort of pattern that kind of works. That's a pattern. And the density, let's turn that into some sort of polymetric pattern that goes something like this maybe. Okay, so this should work. And now this sounds like this. So the sequencer is just a sequencer. Like you have 16 steps. I wish I could have a longer sequence so it's not only 2 bars. If anyone is working for VISCO or the company that made this, please consider a couple of these suggestions. They might really get us to new creative places. So this is probably way too short, even for slow tempo music. Like only a 2-bar repetition could be way too predictable. And maybe some randomness could also, well, randomness on the trigger of the notes could help a lot. So if you just click, you create new notes. If you draw this down, you're handling the velocity. If you left click, you raise it. If you want to raise a whole track, you right click and you clear all tracks or clear only one track. If you grab the handle on the right, you're changing the length of the MIDI note because you can export the MIDI. But this doesn't make sense to me. Why are you giving me this control if this is not working as some sort of gate for the sample? It doesn't matter if this is really short, the sample will last just as long. Let me raise those other and let me make this really short. That's lasting really long time, and this, that's lasting exactly the same time. So I'm not sure if the concept behind this is to make this a trigger or a gate. If it's a trigger, it doesn't make sense to give me control of the length, if you get what I mean, or if that makes any sense. But let me know, please. I just want tools to get creative faster. That's all I crave for in my life. On the left side, you can change or displace and get things off grid. That's really, really nice. And you have a general swing feel across, and that's all in the sequencer section. I'm usually the kind of person that always asks for a way to record out of plugins. So for example, you can see that here I am sampling the plugin just by assigning this and just create the channels that are listening to the actual channel that has the plugin inserted, and then you can take the routing from the plugin and just name your tracks properly so you don't get a mess of your samples, and you can resample that always. So what I wanted to do is to find a way to automate this part of the plugin, and I didn't want to waste the modulation section, so I could also access it from the lanes or the MIDI control. It can listen to MIDI, so take advantage of that always in your plugins for creative automation. This is modulation, this is not automation, it's not the same thing. So I have this small hit where it increases the send level for track 3, and then it stays up. I'm making it way too obvious, so it's only just clear what I'm trying to say. Okay, so I'm going to take it off, and now it's simply not happening. Right, so you get what I mean. Remember that whenever something is not necessarily built in the plugin, there's always a workaround using your DAW. So you have to learn your DAW. You have to know how to get things done. Once I did that, especially on Ableton Live, you always get this extra access, so you can handle this, and you can see it has a blue dot. Blue dot means modulation. I'm not automating. Automating takes control of the parameter. That doesn't work for a lot of things. You can change the width, I love this, the panning, the amp, and you have a small clipping stage that I really like for this kick. More or less that works. Some main effects that you can use for certain sound that you want to bring into it if you don't want to use more external plugins. You have a lot to work with inside of this, or you can use it once you're summing it up outside of the plugin, having your own balance into it. And a filter built in, high pass and low pass, more like a DJ kind of filter. And the modulation section. So I have a lot of things that I can route for LFOs, for envelopes, and the envelopes have the same parameters that we expect. And LFOs have this per voice that works with the polyphonic thing that I said. If this is off, every single note that is triggered will have exactly the same point where you are going, especially if you don't have retrigger on. But if you have per voice on, it's going to navigate through this road every single time it triggers. I hope that makes sense. You can loop it so it's exactly perfect. You can change the rate, you can sync it to your DAW. There's nothing new on that sense. And the targets available are like this bottom 5 parameters at hand, pretty much all of the modifiers, and a couple of things in the mixer that you can see that are the amp, plan, blah, 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 and these modifiers that are time, noise, tonal thing, tuning, transform that goes from one sample to another. So let me apply this in a crazier way. Of course, part of the fun thing in something like this is not to throw only drums at it. And this is the thing that I'm talking about. Like, I can live with it throwing me a small demo screen every time I open it until I make myself at peace with, I really want it, and I really want it. So I need to save up a little bit, but I will buy it. Especially because I'm really intrigued by how can I use this in some hyperpop or pop futuristic sounds, some top percussion sounds, and in some ambient sound design. So yeah, sounds fun. So here I have these 2 samples. that are two vocal samples at E minor, and it's mutating from one to another, from this tonal into noise thing. What I really like about this is that I'm taking advantage of the Synth generation tools built in Ableton Live 12. In this case, it could be easier to just go into, remember that I told you that it starts on C3, or if I hadn't said it, now it's the time to say it, and I can just generate some sort of pattern. And look for any amount of repetitions that fit whatever kind of music I'm doing. I'm always playing around with the chance of MIDI notes, so I find out new patterns that I can resample and that I like and enjoy, because I like finding order in chaos. So first I did that. I did a lot of modulation so I could go from the noise into the tonal section, and I ran into a pattern that sounds something like this. Please check the harmony. If you're using samples, like, try to avoid these kind of dissonances that are not necessary. Remember that another way of resampling is just open another track, MIDI track or audio track, and start recording whatever the other track that you're manipulating outputting, right? So I resampled that, and I'm not doing more effects processing down here. I'm just chopping out some things that I didn't like so much, and I'm taking advantage of the time stretching feature that so many of us use, and handling the transposition of the samples as well. Especially, for example, understanding that how this is a way of stating that that's the end of the bar. I really like these feelings. Okay, so maybe I need a little bit more of this just to show it off. Right? And let me show it against the drums so it actually makes sense. And if I place this against the harmony and the rest of the music, okay, so this is a really fun plugin. I really encourage you to go check it out. This is a fantastic idea. It's hard to come up with something new. It has this little touch of cable guys that I highly suggest that you check it out. It has these small kind of sound design tricks that many of us use, but it's saving a lot of time, and the fact that you can just load samples into it and handle them and make your own batches of new samples is great. And this is just a fantastic idea. I really love it. Again, they didn't pay me anything. I'm just happy to share something like this. I will save up, I will end up buying it, have fun with it, get creative. And even though this is often a very audio heavy kind of channel, I am trying to output more of the music production, kind of just get creative. Sometimes that's the only thing that matters. Information out there. If you like this kind of videos, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you hear everything that I am releasing every single week. Last week I made a video about things you can do to drums, and feel free to jump into this new series that is going to be things you can do to instruments. If you want me to do some strange thing to any instruments that you are using in a production, contact me down below, leave me a comment, an email, and I will get in touch with you. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.